Welcome to Talent Take 5, the show where we talk with people shaping the future of work. I'm your host, Andrew Sterling. My guest today has changed how the world finds jobs. In 1994, Jeff Taylor launched Monster.com, the 454th domain ever registered online. Monster went on to reach an $8 billion valuation and transformed the entire recruiting industry. But Jeff's story goes way beyond Monster. He's back to reinvent the space he helped create. His new company, BoomBand, launches early next year with a bold idea that the resume is dead. Job postings are broken, and AI might be speeding up the collapse instead of fixing it. Jeff, great to see you. Welcome to Talent Take 5.
Andrew, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Now, for the audience, Jeff, I'd love to just kind of talk about how we first met, which came back at the HRLF Ignite conference back in April, where I had the good fortune to see you speak and kind of get the first glimpse into BoomBand. And that was a great conversation that you had, and it was awesome getting to meet you there.
I think what was fun is it's a little bit of a coming out for me because I was outside the industry for 20 years. And one of the first conferences I spoke at was actually HRLF. And it was a fireside chat with Bob McCarthy. And we had a chance to basically take the stage, and I don't think I let him get a word in edgewise. And we just talked about some of the challenges in our industry. And I know we'll get into that, but I met you at that conference. And then I think what's cool about networking, kind of people say like, should I bother going out to conferences? But the fact that you and I met there, and then you said, would you be willing to come and speak at my HR networking group of people that have been
HR Leadership Pivot. Yep.
The Pivot group. So I came and we had a cool session with probably 25, 28 people, our people that were in transition. We went out for drinks afterwards, and then we've kind of stayed in contact. You reached out to me and said, I'm starting a podcast. And what did I say to you?
You're like, yes, but I don't like episode. Like, I think you even said, I want to be like episode 7 or something, you know?
Yeah. So the idea was, I don't need to be your guinea pig, but I'm happy to support you in this process. And it's great. And today I have a podcast that is called the BoomBand Showcase. And our idea is to showcase job seekers being human, and with all the noise, I don't think it's really hard to stand out. And so we've done a podcast that just features 3 job seekers. We call them players, and going through their process and having some fun, but being on camera and being real humans. And I think the response has been great. And so coming off of that podcast, coming over here to spend some time with you, Andrew, and I'm excited.
Super excited. And it's like, we're back in the broadcasting booth. I know you get the headset on again, the microphone. It's like this is your wheelhouse, man. So I'm really excited to check out the podcast, and congrats on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I have a kind of a think tank office, and I built a podcast studio. And what's fun is this is a medium where we can get to know each other, and then we can broadcast that out to whoever wants to watch. And so that kind of voice for a brand today, we were talking about this before the show, pre-pod, I guess they call that. And the idea is that you need really to have your personal brand be more front and center. I've always believed in this, by the way, but it's become really critical with a combination of all the noise happening in the market, all the economic and political pressure that we're feeling, as well as AI, to make sure people know who you are and how you stand out there.
It's great stuff. So before we jump into Monster, the journey to BoomBand, and what you're working on now, I have to start with something that we have in common. Back before Monster, before your advertising days, you were a contingency recruiter. Is this true? Were you in my space at one point?
I was. And you know, I think the space in many ways hasn't changed that much. I was a contingency recruiter at a company called Search Inc., which was they had a few offices, but their main office was in Waltham. And I had an opportunity to get a desk. It had nothing on it, just a phone. And it was basically, you know, this is embarrassing, but it was like the Yellow Pages, and, you know, do whatever you can. And I was going to play as program analyst, 128 and 495. And the guy, Paul George, that owned that business said, "Jeff, I think you can do it. It's one of the most difficult areas to get into, but once you
Mm,
get into it, the pay is higher." And, not unlike today with full stack developers, and even with the impact of like the cursors and the windsurfs of the world, these full stack developers, I think, are as important today as they were then. And so that was my job, and I placed programmers. And I started out probably over engineering, trying to understand the market. By the 2 year mark, I had done a good job and was a high biller in my office, but I really liked the advertising.
mm,
And we used to put all of our job descriptions together. It's funny, it could be like a ghost job today. We would mash these jobs together and make one job. That's all the money we had. We'd place that job in the Boston Globe, and then the response from that job would be a feeder for us for placements. And I liked
interesting.
the advertising process, and I started learning more about it, and I found out that there was a ad agency culture and that there was a 15% fee for ads that were placed in the newspapers. And I ended up going to work for a company called JWG Associates, which was in Wellesley, and then ultimately moved from working for JWG, a guy named Jim Goldman, to actually founding my own firm, which was called Addion. And ads was what we did, and an ion was a particle of energy. And so it was
Yep.
advertising energy
Cool
aimed
name.
at the human resources area. We were a human resource communications agency. And the main thing we did was place help wanted ads in the newspaper.
It's interesting. I'm curious, what did those early eat what you kill days teach you about recruiting and talent acquisition that still shape how you see the industry today, right?
So um, I had a rack of dimes. And, in the mornings, I would call companies, and in the afternoons and the evenings, I would call applicants. It's different than now, but, the same concept was there, and I figured out I learned from another recruiter, every time you made a phone call and they told you to, F off, that,
Yep.
I'd put a dime in the cup. And, it started out it would take me 36, 38 dimes to get a job order. But as I got better at it, I got it down to like 21, 22 dimes, and then I would get a job order. So that's means I'm calling into HR departments, calling hiring managers, and whatever it took to get a job opening. And then in the afternoon, I started the same process where I'd put a dime in the cup calling applicants. And most people at that time couldn't talk at work. If people were at home or hybrid or whatever, now maybe it's easier. But they would say, "Call me tonight." And so I would buy my lunch and my dinner at the same time at lunchtime. At dinner time, I would run the stairs in my building and jump rope in the basement, and they had a shower, and I would take a quick shower, and then I would eat my dinner that I bought at lunchtime, and then I would stay on the phone from 6:15, 6:30 all the way until 10:30.
Was
And
everybody else doing the cup thing too, or is that
no,
just you?
no, I learned it from another recruiter. That recruiter did not make it, because they really didn't believe. It's really hard to get no after no after no. It's sort of
Oh,
like the
yeah, yeah.
job seeker process today when you're getting turned down after turned down, rejection after rejection. But it's a numbers game, and I knew that. So there's a bunch of lessons in there. One is I understood the concept of you're not gonna get a yes every time, and so what does that mean? And so if it took me 22, no's to get to a yes, every one was 1/22nd closer to getting to my yes, and so I took each one of those no's as a positive action. So that was the first thing. Second thing is I realized I could work harder than anybody I knew at that point, and that was when I was in my mid-20s, maybe 26, 27, and, that was very important that I had
Mm,
another gear. So most people just pack up at 5 o'clock or whatever, and they would say, "Oh, I'll make phone calls tonight," or whatever, but they didn't. And I
yeah.
did. And so all of a sudden I started having a better activity board, and I could see that. So that idea of um, people always say you got to work smarter, not harder. I've held for my whole life that you got to work smarter and harder. And that is defining for me. I think the other thing I learned is I fell in love with recruiting. Like, every part of HR, I just liked this area. I liked the people aspect of it, and maybe that's obvious. I don't know. I'm an
Right.
extrovert, and I love the dynamics of engaging with people, right? And so the advertising for me was the creative side that I was missing. And so when I went to work for a small ad agency, I think I started, there were 13, 12 people. When I left, there were 90. And most of the balance of that growth were people that worked for me by the time I got done. And I went to the owner and asked if he would share a little bit of the ownership of the company. And he said no, which was his prerogative. So
You
I
gotta
left.
ask, right? You gotta ask.
That's right. So, and then I started, Adyen, and then so that was where I learned about branding,
Mm.
and, you know, there may be a few people that remember this, but I used to go to Nira.
Oh, yeah.
And, one Nira, I got a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and I rolled it into my booth with chaps and helmets and sunglasses, and I had people sit on the motorcycle, put on all the gear, and then I took their picture, and it was the idea of changing your
I
image
love that.
and how easy it was, and I was doing recruitment advertising and getting people to change the image of their companies out in the marketplace, change the narrative. And so I started learning about branding, and also Adyen, was my first name. I didn't want it to be called Taylor Advertising
Yep.
because I felt like then everyone would say, "Okay, I wanna talk to Taylor," and I wanted to be able to distribute that power across the organization. And so because of the success of that, the next name that I came up with was Monster. And, so the confidence of calling my ad agency Adyen instead of Taylor Advertising, there was something like 400 agencies in the state of Massachusetts, and like 395 of them were the names of the people. So we would have been Sterling and
Yeah.
Taylor
Right.
Advertising, right? And so, there what, you establish in credibility, you lack in the opportunity to have something that's bigger than the 2 of us, right, if we would name it that way. And so, uh, that was the confidence and the learnings that came to Monster. And so I wanna make sure I answered your question because we had this start together, both in contingency recruiting,
Yeah.
and, I think you mentioned kind of pre-pod, like there's a path that you took there.
It's a really interesting evolution seeing how the beginning part of your career trajectory when you were, earning as a 20-year-old, right, sort of formulated where it ended up with launching one of the greatest, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the Super Bowl ads with Monster and all that success that you've had, really from being a contingency recruiter and then having this creative pull that brought you into the advertising space, and then it's like the genesis of the idea for Monster kind of coming out of both of those worlds that you were living in, which is really really interesting to me. I'm where I'm aligned on that from a creative perspective, right? I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter. There's always this pull to like do creative things, but also this inclination to business and wanting to hustle and enjoying seeing companies grow. So it's kind of like there's a huge parallel between the both of us and how our brains
Yeah.
work with business and creative output. So it's a really interesting story. So let's shift and talk about Monster. So walk me through, how did it come up? The you mentioned the name. This came to you in a dream. Like, is that? Tell me how this all came up and the starting of
Yeah.
Monster.
You know, if it's okay, there's a parallel that you're drawing, which, around music that I think is sort of key here. So, I grew up in Needham, and my high school experience, I moved to Needham in 7th grade, and I didn't have any friends. I wasn't very good at making friends. I'd moved around a lot as a kid, and, I was I wasn't a sports kid, and so Needham was a tough town to be in, right? And so I got through high school in my kind of laws of the jungle to blend in to avoid being eaten, right? And
Yep.
then I went to college and said, "Look, I have more potential than this. This is a restart for me. Let me see if I can do it differently." And then it was the other side of the laws of the jungle, which is to stand out to attract a mate. And without going into gory detail, the idea was to become more of an extrovert from being in a safe place, which I probably tried to be more in junior high and high school. I did an awful lot at UMass, ran a bunch of organizations, um, and one of them was my fraternity, and I did the music in my fraternity and became a DJ for my fraternity parties, and then
The vibes guy. You're the vibes guy.
parlayed that into having the hot DJ job at a club at UMass, parlayed that into having a hot job at a club in Falmouth that was called Yesterdays and, was Brothers 4 and then Yesterdays, and then went to the Palace in Saugus, which was a massive nightclub, and then ultimately ended up at the Metro, which was then became Avalon and then Avaland in Boston, which is where the House of Blues is today in Boston.
Oh, awesome.
And so, I had a music career, uh, so before I was a contingency recruiter, I was a full-time DJ, and I worked 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week, and at that point, the DJ DJ'd the whole night, so I would DJ from 9 o'clock at night until 2 in the morning, and I met a contingency recruiter DJing. So all these things are network. Uh, but the other piece is I really didn't go to class very much at UMass. I ran the tour guide service. I ran the school paper. I was a leader in my fraternity and did a lot there. And but I didn't go to class. So I left UMass. I think 5.5 years in without a degree, with quote unquote a few credits to go. I wasn't sure. And I went back when I was 39 and graduated from UMass and was a graduation speaker for 35,000 people. And so it's a good example of doing it my way. I learn differently. My brain's wired differently. A very visual person. I'm not a big reader. And so I'm like an ADHD kid that couldn't follow the traditional structure, so was sort of an outlier in a school situation, but like right in the center as an entrepreneur. And so that backdrop is kind of where the monster story, I think, starts to make sense, that I'm in an ad agency, but I got an idea, and that idea turns out to way, way bigger than my ad agency, right? So my ad agency was 32 people, and Monster at the height was over 10,000 employees, 35 countries, couple billion in sales a year, and changing an industry wholesale from being in the newspaper help wanted section to being digital ads online, and put the first job posting and first resume on the World Wide Web. Uh, Basically started a process of HR tech, or future work as you're describing your podcast, all started from that.
It's fascinating. I recently did an episode of my podcast with a good friend of mine, Lou Shipley, who teaches at HBS. He's a three-time software company CEO, and he's got a book called "The Unlikely Entrepreneur" about people that went on to start some really interesting companies that didn't have all the hallmarks of their backgrounds. You wouldn't think. I feel like you fit into that. Do you feel like you were an unlikely entrepreneur when you look back in starting Monster?
Yeah, I mean, I had very good upbringing, good parents. They were both teachers. My mom was a guidance counselor, and my dad was a professor at UMass Boston. But I grew up in an education-oriented family, but with the kind of management structure, you wouldn't typically describe it as that, is you can be who you want to be, and you can kind of do it your way, and we're not going to overlay our principles per se, or maybe we'll overlay our principles, but not the way you're going to do it. Because they were very open minded to me being a different kid, they did not um, kind of hold me back, and they didn't let my teachers do it either. I can remember my dad basically saying, Jeff does not have to memorize all this stuff in the way you're requiring. That may not be his strong suit for how he learns. But if you could test him in another way, which the schools generally had no interest in, right?
Right.
But test me in another way. I'm in an ad agency that has hundreds of customers placing help wanted ads, and they're not happy. And I can see, and that's a superpower I think that I have, is I can see, but then I need other people to help me. And I know that. So
Yep.
I'm very supportive of team and then ultimately large swaths of people. And as a non sequitur to this conversation, you could almost say, ask anybody that worked at Monster, and I think they would say it was the best job they ever had because of the support of the team, and the kind of collective mission and the work hard, play hard. And that's, yeah, generally speaking, that's probably grown out of what I'm like.
Well, one of the things that I find is really hard for people, and this is probably true of a lot of CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs, is this struggle to ask for help because it's like your ego's in the way. But I haven't found that with you, where you want to bring people in, and you generally are energized by hearing other people's stories and what their DNA is, and learning from people. And I think that's a big reason maybe why you built such a impactful culture with Monster in the day. And so it's exciting. But I wonder if you look back, right? I mean, you think about after you launched Monster. So take me through that first year where there's a lot of uncertainty, right? I know we just talked about being like an unlikely entrepreneur, but once you actually decided, like, we're doing this thing,
Yeah.
how was it, walk me through what happened in that first year. I know that you, from what I was seeing in my research, that there was a lot of client pushback at times with really rolling this thing out, and maybe
Yeah.
not some support from the board. So I'm curious, like, if you look back and have any good lessons learned from that experience, having finally pulled the trigger on the thing.
Yeah. I mean, you could start with when you call something monster, my wife at the time was like, I won't leave the house with you if you call it monster. My employees were like, it's like the monster under your bed. Like, that's terrible.
Scary.
My biggest client was like, not only do I not like the name, but no one would look for a job during the day, while they're at work. And so the the one of the things that probably all of that experience had given me was the confidence and sort of the fortitude and the drive to say, no, I have a sense that this is the thing, and that if I compromise this at all, that I'm gonna miss. And, what was interesting is in the beginning, there's a lot of these stories that have been told already, right? So I wanna try to find, the interesting path here. It's that the customers were unhappy with the response they were getting from the Boston Globe, but they were also unhappy with the response they were getting from Monster. Because the Boston Globe was just giving you these sort of tired pool of applicants which were just around the Boston area because of the limitations of the distribution of the Globe, and that it only came out on Sundays, and kind of all the snail mail resume stuff. It just was all bad, right? But I'm saying, okay, do a digital ad on this thing called www.monster.com. It's called the Monster Board, and people are seeing these monsters, and it's like, what the fuck's going on here, right? It was sort of like, what are you smoking here, Jeff, right? And I can remember I did a WBZ. Is WBZ still around in Boston?
I think it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm sure. sure it is,
isn't
right?
it? Has to be.
So, I did a W I
10:30
did a
AM
WBZ
radio.
breakfast. Yeah. I did a BZ breakfast, probably 500 people there, which is amazing, and we were talking about the internet, and it was like blank faces. It's like, if you did a BZ breakfast, we should do one of these. Do a BZ breakfast on AI. And you would get the same, it's a little bit later now than it was when I was talking about Monster. If I parallel what's happening today and what was happening in 1993, 1994. But what was crazy is that no one knew what it was going to be. Like, it's just so obvious to look back now and say the internet changed everything. There's 500 million websites today, right? Like, so this is a mainstream activity 20 times over, right? But at the beginning, I can remember one of my salespeople, her name's Carol, coming to me basically crying and saying that she had spent the day having meetings with HR people, about 45 minutes on what the internet was and 5 minutes on Monster, or never really being able to explain what Monster was, and to some extent, we had a hard time explaining what Monster was, right? It was that early. But, the idea of the buyer-seller marketplace, the idea of having the employers and the job seekers together in a marketplace, and to be able to have employers looking for resumes and having job seekers looking for jobs and matching that process, it's amazing how well that worked. And then I don't know what happened, but we've kind of gotten away from that. And to some
Mm,
extent, if I just like say where BoomBand is going, I'm going to try to get back to, in some ways, the basics of a buyer seller marketplace with the innovation of AI, just
yep.
like when I was introducing the innovation and it was internet, right? And so that first year was a lot of thrashing. I remember talking to a woman that worked as a kind of manager of the operations. Her name was Jill. And we had 396 jobs on Monster, and we had 5 job orders that were actually physically printed out jobs that we needed to put up on the system. Think about it like that, right? And, she'd gone home for the weekend, and I remember on Monday, I said, like, "If you would put up those 5 jobs, we woulda had over 400 jobs on Monster."
Yeah.
And, we ended up with a million jobs on Monster
Right.
at any given time, right? So just the juxtaposition of me trying to nudge us over 400 jobs. Also, I had an interview with Adweek, and I remember I had 1,000, and I remember, asking my team, "It's 1,000 what? Is it page views? Is it unique visitors?" There wasn't a concept called unique visitors yet even.
Right.
It
Oh,
was
that's
it was
interesting.
people coming to the site, and, they were like, "Yeah, it's 1,000." So I can remember saying, "It's 1,000." And just that was that unclear. So you can fast forward, right? So we went from struggling to like actually applying this, where every job that was in the newspaper also went on Monster. And then I sold Monster, which is maybe a separate story, but to TMP Worldwide. And TMP had 13 recruitment offices that were all placing newspaper help wanted ads. And so all of those ads for $75 or something were getting an additional ad that was going on Monster. So I got this kind of built in across the country forced distribution with low belief, but kind of in a motion that was like already with their help wanted, that they were just got this digital thing. Okay, fine, throw it in there. And then I can remember at about the 6-year mark, so this is after Super Bowl, everything, a thing came out and said that online, digital help wanted ads have now surpassed, online in the newspaper. And it took 6.5 years,
Wow.
right?
It's
So
amazing.
that
I feel like the pace of change of that was longer than anticipated. I mean, now I feel like that would be it's like a fraction of the speed. The speed of which things change now is so dramatically faster.
I would say yes and no, right? So someone's like, okay, internet was really got hot, right? But you got to figure we're an application on the internet, and you had to work through. You had Alta Vista and Lycos and Yahoo and Google. They're all fighting each other, right? Just like Perplexity and Anthropic and
Yep.
OpenAI and Grok and I don't know whatever I missed somebody, maybe Gemini and Copilot
Copilot.
or
Yep.
whatever are all battling each other, right? We're just in that phase right now. So even though it feels like it's going so fast, the conversations right now are starting to be like, okay, is it a bubble, right? And
Mm,
I kind of feel like this harkens back very much to when all those search engines were trying to like vie for it. In some ways, Google was one of the last entries. But Google got the search right. Yahoo, that probably should have held the market, got distracted and started buying a bunch of actually extensions of the business and started to be in more businesses. And Google came in and just crushed search and then crushed that market, and all those other competitors went away. And I think there'll be consolidation like that in the AI space, and that we'll see the numbers will be astronomical, right? The day that I don't know, that Grok buys Perplexity and Anthropic and OpenAI get together, who knows what the configurations will be, but
right.
it'll go, it'll be just like the browser market, or just like, I'm really date myself, like AOL, Prodigy, CompuServe, these original kind of digital footprint that we started to experience, that I did as a young kid. And so, that consolidation, I think, was happening. And so it just didn't move as, even though it was moving fast, when you were in it, it felt like that. But 1998, I'm like, okay, this is really working. We need to press the accelerator. How are we going to do that? And we said, let's go on the Super Bowl.
That's a
And
big
that
bet.
was
And that
like,
was a big bet. That was a
that
big
was a
bet.
big bet, right? And so I think in 1998, we spent about $3 or $4 million on marketing, which was a lot because we were only in the United States at that point. We'd maybe just opened in Canada, and we were getting traction and it was going well, but to just have a free $4 million for marketing. And then the Super Bowl was 2.5 million dollars for the three 30-second spots. So for 90 seconds, I had
Almost
to
all the
spend
budget.
almost my whole budget from the year before. And um, so what the confidence that you have to run the stairs as a recruiter and get back on the phone is the same confidence that it takes to call your ad agency Addion instead of Taylor Advertising, which is the same confidence to go to a BZ room that has 500 people in it and talk about something that you're sort of just learning at the same time that you're teaching it. And now all of a sudden I'm going on the Super Bowl with a voice for job seekers that's completely counterintuitive to the way the business works, because companies pay, job seekers used it for free. And so the idea of going on the Super Bowl to talk to HR people, no. The
Right.
idea of going to the Super Bowl to talk to every job seeker on the planet, right? When I grow up, I want to file all day. I want to have a brown nose. Yes, sir. No, sir. Anything for a raise, sir. When I grow up, the last vignette was I want to be forced into early retirement, right? So apropos of today. And one of the things we talked about at that HRLF conference, I remember talking with the whole group about that and saying, is that message still relevant today? And I think it is. Um, but are you kind of following this like this confidence trail then has to be supported by actual activity that works,
Putting
which
dimes in
then,
the cup. You got to put
but
dimes
it's
in the cup.
put a dime in the cup. That's right. But
That's
it's a
right.
flywheel. And honestly, I got goosebumps right now. That's actually great. Uh, that I'm
Just
still.
not on the corner of the street, not at the stoplight in the corner. Like keep the cup in the office. You know.
That's right, but that's the same confidence that I'm starting a new company. I'm 65 now. 3. So the idea of this flywheel, I think, is important because it's partially when you get the idea right, the flywheel works, but then you have to pump the flywheel, right? And so opening in London and then over the course of 3 years, opening in 19 countries in Europe, buying the copycat monsters in every single country and switching them over and convincing their people that it was the right thing to become part of this global juggernaut monster, even though they intuitively knew they had copied Monster, so like it was a natural motion to become part of Monster. And then we opened in Asia. I remember I had a company in China meet me at the equivalent of HR Tech, one of the big conferences out in Las Vegas at that time. And they said, "Oh, we want to show you our jobs product." And I was like, "Great." I went to breakfast with them and they showed me Monster, basically. And every place we had a monster, they had a fox. And so it was a complete copy. And they said, "Oh, and you also copied your database structure. So if you want to do a deal together, we can just communicate, right?" And so that was an early lesson. And I was frustrated coming off of that meeting that people could just copy us, but I ended up buying that company. And
Wow.
so that's
Sounds
the
like a
flywheel.
lawsuit coming here.
Well, that's the flywheel that it took to not only be a hot brand, but also to be a public company and have the sales that would follow the idea. And like we had a sales motion that I can't really take credit for. Andy McKelvey, the guy I sold Monster to, was a great salesman, and he hired a group of people. Steve Pogorzelski is well known in this space. Jocelyn Talbot, a number of leaders that are in sales all over New England, in fact, all over the country now, were the sales force of Monster, and we had a couple hundred what we called hunters that were out managing direct sales, and we had I don't know, at some point probably close to 1,000 on the phone inside telesales reps. And all of those salespeople have gone on to do great things everywhere. And I couldn't have done any of this without that team, right? I can see, but I need other people to help me to bring that vision to life. And as long as you're willing to share in that, both from a stock perspective and options or whatever, but just sharing in the idea, I think you called it earlier, as I'm open to that. Uh, just side thing when I went to work for Ray Dalio, which was a kind of a unexpected thing in my
Yeah.
career.
How did that happen? How did that come up?
All right, so fast forward 2003, uh, Monster has survived 9/11, is profitable and crushing it. I meet with Reed about LinkedIn. I
Oh
had 2
yes.
legs of the
Yep.
stool at Monster. I had the jobs piece, I had the resume piece. Jobs is about 65% of my revenue. 60 to 65. Resume was about 30% of my revenue. Everything else I had tried, 5, 6, 7, 8% of my revenue. I couldn't change it. I could not move the needle. And I tried a bunch of different things. And so the idea of buying LinkedIn and having it be the third leg of the stool was my role of keeping that flywheel going, right? But my board had other ideas. They did not like the idea, and so they turned down my overture to buy LinkedIn, which I had agreement with Reed to do, and so I resigned. Uh, and that was, you have these doors and windows that open and close in your life. And for me, that was a principal door that closed because I basically decided that if the board knew better how to run Monster, that they should do it. And that
Mm.
I couldn't be in that environment. And so I went off, started another company called Eons, which was a baby boomer social network. got my butt kicked by Facebook so hard, raised a lot of money, and probably disappointed some people, had some good learning lessons in there. And then I got recruited while I was on the bench, having exited that business, sold it for, for like a bunt or a single. It was not a very good sale of eons. And then I got recruited by Ray Dalio from Bridgewater to come and be a non-finance exec in their organization. And went through the interview process. Ray did not like me, but the rest of the management team did. And within 6 months or so, Ray and I had hit it off. And
Wow.
I worked directly for Ray Dalio for about 10 years. So from 2012 to 2022.
You have to
And
send him a resume, Jeff?
I did have to put a resume together. It was with an executive search firm that put me in. That's full circle to our
It's fine. We're
conversations.
not gonna talk we're not gonna talk about them,
And
it's fine.
so they helped me build I think my resume for that. But what was interesting is, and I think this is what triggered this, is they did a K2 report on me. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It's like a background check. Yeah, it's a
Like
company that will they go right to your 5th
like
grade school
CIA
teacher, like,
intelligence
that's how.
report on you.
Yeah, 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 so they put a 80-page report, back on me, and, one of the things they said is that Jeff is very open about his strengths and weaknesses, and, 2 or 3, maybe 4 different people stated that Jeff is not strong in some areas, and he'll admit that, so that's a watch out for. Well, to Bridgewater, that is huge to the plus because that means that I'm open-minded and that I, have an interesting view of myself where I'm not just naively invincible, that I understand, so I've always hired into my weaknesses. Remind me to tell you a little something about that, but, that report also said Jeff DJs under an alias called Jeff or Tail, and he also DJs under another alias called Stripe, where he wears a zebra mask and Rasta hair.
Oh,
And
that's
they had
fire.
a picture. They had a picture of me as Stripe, and they said, "This is a watch out for, that you should know," because I was
That's in
going to
the
be in
file?
finance. I was going to be in the people area of Bridgewater. But that was first of all, that was amazing that K2 got
Is
that
this the guy
stuff.
you wanna hire?
And
Look at this guy
yeah,
in his
yeah, yeah. And
zebra ru Do you still have that
I
mask? Do you have that?
uh, I do actually.
You gotta find yeah, you gotta get that thing out. That needs to be a LinkedIn post, Jeff.
I DJ'd for lots of years as Jeffertail and as Stripe at the same festivals where they would actually hire both of those DJs to play, and both those DJs
It's like a
was me
Superman
and my
telephone booth. You come out at
and
Jeff or tail in, and then the zebra comes out.
yeah, and my partner. I'm gonna get here in 2 seconds, and I will show you that bit of scariness. So, uh,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
I think you can probably see
You
that
could
right there.
you got you text that to me, and I'll put it in the video.
Uh, yeah, uh, so I love electronic dance music, and I was described the DJ business as a dome and a pyramid and a spire at the top. And the only DJs that make money like a Calvin Harris or a Diplo or a Skrillex or I don't know, David Guetta, that those were the DJs in the spire, and they made real
Oh, yeah.
money. And I made it up into the pyramid somewhere, but I always had a full-time job. I was running monster.com and DJing on a big stage at Ultra Music Festival down in Miami at the same time,
Oh,
right?
that's
So
amazing. Unreal.
I didn't mean to digress. I just like that was I think what you were talking about is kind of what you're like. And so those are kind of honest moments about what I'm like.
Well, it's really interesting, and I would love to get into diagnosing the industry, the landscape that we're in. I think you were on another podcast talking about AI, how it's integrating into the recruiting space now, and it's kind of analogous to putting like nitrous on a Model T. Would love to see a Fast and Furious, 1890s
Yeah,
version
yeah,
with
yeah.
that, but
2025 AI Model T with nitrous.
the nitrous on a
Yep,
Model T with recruiting, it's being used to enhance job descriptions. Candidates are putting together the perfect resume. And as we were talking about pre-pod, there's like some jobs are getting legit like thousands of candidates. So we got a big problem
right,
here. I think a lot of what we were just talking about is not only you and your DNA, but then also approaching problem solving through the lens of like,
right.
well, there's a gap in the infrastructure. And so maybe that's a good place for us to kind of talk about your take on the state of the market, given you're a pioneer
Yeah.
in the recruiting technology, looking at this new disruptive technology, and what's your take on what's happening?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Like if you juxtapose 1994 and 2025, I think it's interesting if you just look at the advent to the internet, which really started around 1990, but it was really getting a lot of buzz. The introduction invention of the browser by Mark Andreessen, who's now the biggest venture capitalist,
Yep.
and then you had free email, you had a Hotmail and a couple other email. This is before Gmail. So people had access to get into the email communication, and then you had the approval 1992 of H-1B visas, and it's that collection along with l- um, a massive uptick in the economy and the growth of companies. I was New England, kind of 128 superhighway. I was a Boston guy, right? And so Boston was like just like growing like crazy, lots of companies. And so you had, in this case, an unhappy environment because the seekers weren't happy and the employers weren't happy, but yet the market was hot. And so put all that together, and the 1994 disruption of the internet basically created the the impetus for Monster and for a complete change in the kinds of companies that did well during that period, right? We're having that same sort of like disruption right now. It's so obvious, but I think it's worth just stepping back for a second and saying, okay, ChatGPT came out in November, December of 2023. In the first 100 days, it grew to 100 million people.
Yeah.
And so the the trajectory, and then it has gone. I think it did a million in 6 months. It did. It's 800 million now. So more than 800 million people in the world are using ChatGPT since December of 2023. And there's some increments there. It went a million to 50 million to 300 million to 800 million. And then the curve is actually slowing, even though it's a massive amount of people. And then you can see where Perplexity, Anthropic, and others actually grew up underneath that and are also doing well. This kind of period of change, there hasn't been a new consumer brand that, um, like a Facebook or you know, TikTok came in. But if you look at all the companies that were the consumer networking brands, um, they all were founded about 14, 15 years ago. There really haven't been any or very few entries in that space over the last 11 to 14 years. Now there's this disruption, and I think you're going to see a whole new set of companies. And you're seeing, for example, ChatGPT just introduced their browser, and what you're starting to see is companies, I don't know, like Figma and the real estate companies are all joining in with ChatGPT, and so you're going to start to see that launching pad around ChatGPT is going to actually impact a lot of different businesses and industries. And what I'm looking at is we're in a marketplace, if I juxtapose it in 1994, with that same potential change. And in recruiting, what AI has done, and this is to your point, um, your early AI solutions for recruiting, like a lazy apply, there's a handful of companies that are like this where you can apply for 500 jobs while you sleep. And that process is creating an already completely messed up ATS environment inside companies, just being overwhelmed by the amount of applicants. So I think what I described pre-pod is you've got this queue at every company of applicants. It's like a mile long, right? And then inside the company, the evaluation of the people coming through is mostly unqualified applicants. And so the process of is exhausting, going through hundreds and hundreds of unqualified applicants to get to a qualified one. And so, you as a recruiter, what's happening is your AI, you're taking the job posting that becomes a cheat sheet. You put that job posting into your favorite LLM, and then you put your resume in and say, can you kind of brush this up, make this look, use the same words if you can and whatever. And some people are more ethical than others. But as far as a machine system that's trying to decipher people that are qualified or not qualified, for early knockout questions, and for some sort of basic cut of who should you talk to, that's actually confusing the system because people that are unqualified are trying to change their resume to make it look like they're qualified. And people that are qualified are sitting there right next to them saying, no, I really am qualified. And the reality is that nobody's getting callbacks.
It's
And
like,
so it's not nobody, right? Very, very small numbers. I have a case study that's a woman that I know, 920 applications. Uh, I'm going to put it in buckets: 300 immediate rejections, 300 that he hadn't heard anything back from, and 300 that wrote back and said you're in consideration, but never any follow-up email after that. Only 20 actually resulted in an interview of any kind. Half of
wow,
those were robots. And of that 20, now you're down to 10 of those talked to 4 or 5 human beings. 2 of them became volunteer positions and 1 full-time offer, which she took.
wow. Shocking.
Okay. But that's only shocking until you just go to the next person and ask their story.
Yeah, it's
And
not
some
far
people
off
are
from
more
that.
disciplined than others, but everyone is applying for what at least feels like hundreds of jobs. And it's the black hole ha- has become so big that there's this disenchantment with this process. And somewhere in the middle of this, as you start to lose confidence as an applicant, this is a very difficult mental health environment to be in, right? Where people that have always been able to get a job now can't find a job. And from the recruiter perspective, they're saying there's so much work to just get through the 2,300 resumes that I have for these 5 positions. And I'm exhausting myself just going through unqualified people. And
Yep.
so what to do, right? And so I was saying that this is actually like a talent meltdown, I think, that's happening right now. And so one of the things that I started thinking about in 2023 was ChatGPT came out, and I said maybe for the first time the technology, which really contextually understands the English language and can start to actually do things that I think are um, able to, in the talent matching process, able to help instead of just make it harder. One of the things that I observe when I do it on a chart, you started with Monster, and then now there's 1,000 HR tech, future of work type companies. And then you go ask the question of the applicants, is the process any better? No. And then you go ask the companies, is the process any better? No. And they all have
Mhm.
caveats. There are certain things that work better or whatever. But generally speaking, the business is in a bad place and really still operating off of at least the principles of the original work that was done when we launched in 1994. So maybe
The
that leads to Boom Band, right?
That I think it does, and it's really an interesting problem that I'm not sure is going away. I've had conversations with probably a dozen or so heads of HR that I've known for some time, and I ask them, right? I go, look, ordinarily, if we work on a search together, you're hiring for your team, and you're going to leverage me to help you with that search. How many people would you want me to show you? And what do you think the answer has been on average, Jeff? Well,
I
that's
have
actually
10, 10.
3 to 5.
Yeah.
5 has been the answer I get most often. And so it becomes a really interesting problem if you're in a contingency search type of role like me, where it's you have access to 900 people. And I have 5 shots at this. Who gets the job? So I think it's a
No, who
really
gets the interview?
interesting problem.
Right, who gets the interview first, right? Like,
Right.
who do you pick to put in front of that company? Right.
Who do I
Well,
even talk to first? And I think a lot of it where the most successful matchmaking comes down to, in my experience, is first, it's all about relationship and really understanding. I think you're getting, and this is where we're going towards Boom Band, is like a more holistic view beyond the resume, which I
right,
loved when we talked about at Ignite, and then when you hosted our HR leadership pivot session in talking about the history of the resume, because we're talking about infrastructure that's lagging, and it's the same formulation, but we're just getting, now it's with the proliferation of technology with AI, it's like the use of that same thing is creating massive bottlenecks and massive amounts of fatigue because of the volume and the speed in which people can get those things in front of you. Like before, you had to mail a resume into a company or like fax it in, right? And now it's just
yeah,
easy apply. The resume hasn't changed. So I'm assuming this is kind of where the genesis of Boom Band came in. So let's talk a little bit about how this idea came to you and maybe some of these threads that we can weave in there.
yep. It's, a sort of complicated genesis. If I kind of reflect a little bit, I always believe that your resume should be one copy, always in distribution, easy to change. Meaning that you're always. I don't like open to work. I think that banner on LinkedIn has a certain stigma to it. It
Yeah, I don't
also
like it either.
it implies some things. And you have to decide, is it on or off? And my feeling is that we all have some propensity to move. It's just for the right opportunity. And so I really like open opportunity, right? Because that could be fractional, it could be gig, it could be side hustles, it could be a little
Yep.
part-time thing that you do on the side, it could be full-time. So I like that. So the second thing is the resume. I don't know what happened, but like as everyone has gotten more savvy to what's the screening that's happening, the resume has turned into a pile of keywords and performance statements. It's just about unrecognizable to a person now, right? It didn't used to be that way. And in fact, I think one of the things you're referencing is I have a resume from 1914, and that resume is amazing for one fact. It looks just like a resume today.
Yep.
Right?
Same
And
same
so it has
infrastructure.
their name, it has their objective, which we would now call summary, let's say. It has their education, it has their current position, previous position, and then some interesting personal facts like the person likes fox hunting and is happily married. Both things probably wouldn't make your resume today, even if they're true. And so
That might be actually more interesting in some cases. I want to know about the fox hunting, you know?
Right, right. And so the if you look in 1914, the car was a Model A, not a Model T. It was the next version, Model A. And the phone was a weird phone that that was one of the first ones that had a handle that hung with a wire, but you can almost imagine what this phone looks like, right? And then you think about your phone today when you put it next to that, what that would be, and you look at a car, it just anywhere outside, and you compare it to that Model A, and then you look at a resume and you're like, "What what happened?" And I think the main point is nobody actually owns the resume. It's free, it's in the wind, it's in the wild, right? And no one has said, "Okay, could we actually change that?" And then so somebody said, and I think I agree, it's my fault because I did the research when I started Monster and decided to make the resume look recognizable because the distribution vehicle was so new and different. I wanted people to anchor around something they recognized. But now 32 years later, whatever, I never expected that it would just stay the same, and it basically has stayed the same. And so, I wanna change that. And then the job posting, oh, resume is French. It means summary. AI does not want a summary of you. AI wants a lot of information. And there's a concept called embedding instead of keywords, where it actually it extracts everything about you, including the relationship of the different things that you have in your background. And what you end up with on the job posting side, it's job posting is not French, but it might as well be because it is also a summary, and what's behind that is job requirement, hiring manager, intake, um, uh, people doing the job right now, historical job postings that go back 10 years, all of which can become a resource for what I call a job signal. And so I
Mhm.
have an idea instead of doing a job posting into the open space so anybody can apply, and then someone will say right now, "Oh, well, I have a custom job board." Okay, but anybody can still apply, right? And that's part of the noise that is coming in. What AI is doing is just taking advantage of all those channels and just filling them up with hundreds of resumes. You think about it, if an AI resume company has 10,000 clients and they're each applying for 500 jobs while they sleep, every single one of them, just think about how the tidal wave of not unqualified stuff that's coming across, even the applicant doesn't know who they're applying to. So I have this thought that if I mapped all of the people in the United States, created those embeddings for all 175 million people, built a I call it a dossier, and it's an unclaimed dossier, which is basically a document that has your summary, has your current role, has your previous roles, but it's synthesized by AI. So it's a little bit shorter version of that, captures all the skills that I can find, but it also incorporates not just your career information, but also your web stuff, your social stuff, and potentially consumer stuff. Put that
Mhm.
all together, make a North Star, Andrew, for you, and then invite you to come in and adopt that record and add to it. And a resume is 85% historical, like your track record, and 15% current. Now, if you're just out of school, that's not true, but most people's resumes look like this. And my belief is that your resume should be 80% what you do today and everything that you do, including your passions and interests and side hustles and the things that you'd really like to do should be about
Mhm.
15%, maybe 5% track record. Somebody said a resume is a pile of experiences you never want to do again. I think that's kind of true. So when I bring these two together in an arena, then what I'm doing now is I'm searching 175 million people. Everyone is there and I'm searching 20 million companies. All the companies are there. I'm using a signal to find the best people instead of just anybody who wants to apply. And for seekers, I'm actually taking their skill set and saying these companies have jobs that match your background or what you want to do. And
Yeah.
so I we we can we can have another podcast at some point, and I'll actually do a. We built the software; it's built and working, and we're going to release about the end of the year. But the idea is just to change the way we do all this.
Well, the other thing that I feel like there's a need that isn't solved for, if you think about if we hadn't met happenstance at a conference, we have a bunch of mutual connection points between recruiting and the creative piece, and we're interested in branding and the podcast thing. If not for us going to that, right, this doesn't happen. But shouldn't there also be beyond jobs, right? Like even Facebook and social networking in general doesn't sort of create this sort of suggestive flow where
Right.
I got led to you somehow, right? There's some kind of algorithmic relationship matrix where I should know Jeff, and there might not be a right? Job signals can be one thing, but I'm curious if that plays into some of the things that like BoomBand could solve for is sort of just broader connectivity, because I think LinkedIn does not afford that. A lot of that is on the individual that they need to be the one to be a connector, and they're a hunter. But some people aren't. Some people are farmers, but I think
Sure.
there's a need there.
So, boom and boom bands. Like, so the band is the thing that I think you're describing. So the boom will be the arena and the idea that you can get those matches. But if you want to get rid of all the skills in the arena and just put in kayaking, I should be able to introduce you to other kayakers.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, if we have a music interest in common, we could find that music interest. So I've kind of said, come for the tools, come for this reinvention of the dossier, come for the reinvention of the job signal, but stay for the network. Right. And so one of the HR people that I talked to said, I want to use this as my dating site. And so I think there's going to be a lot of applications for this thing that we're doing. I think the main point here is the system's broken, and someone sort of has to take the risk and the responsibility, put themselves out there to say, why don't we have, from a first principles perspective, a different way to think about this? And that's what we're trying to do with BoomBand.
So where does BoomBand stand right now? I know you guys are launching in
Yeah.
short order. I know I've met multiple people that have come through my network and folks that I think had got introduced to you through HRLF and
Yeah.
the HR leadership pivot that I run that are involved with some of the beta testing, the backstage piece. So what is
Yeah.
happening right now? And
Yeah. So,
for those listening that are interested.
the first thing is we launched our podcast for job seekers called the BoomBand Showcase, and we're featuring job seekers every week, just helping them be human and kind of cut through the digital noise of your resume. The second thing is sign up for our backstage pass at boomband.com. You're going to be the first ones to be able to build your dossiers in our system. That's going to start in the next couple of weeks, right about Halloween. And then we'll, just before the end of the year, we'll have a soft launch, quiet launch, where we have about 40 development partners, companies that are going to start working with stuff and experimenting. And then we'll bang the pot and do a big launch probably about February. And so the goal is we're going to launch in New England. We're going to basically focus on Boston. I always described it as like throwing a cinder block into Boston and let the ripples go out. That's our plan for launch. And we have all the
Tea Party of you.
Yeah, we have all the data for the whole country, but we're gonna pinch in, so just to work on product market fit and traction, and then as soon as we get that traction, we'll open in New York and New Jersey, and then we'll open the country. So that's kind of the path and the plan that we're on right now.
So Jeff, I mean, this has been incredible. I can't thank you enough for joining us, and folks, for you listening. If you're feeling that overwhelm, if you've been in that thousands of resumes pit with no clarity, definitely start paying attention to Jeff and his team at BoomBand. Check out his podcast and boomband.com for sure, as we kind of write the next chapter in hiring. So Jeff, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Talent Take 5 wherever you listen to podcasts. Share it with leaders who you think are ready to rethink hiring and the future of work. And again, I'm Andrew Sterling, your host. Keep building great teams and keep pushing the industry forward. And remember, go where the boom bands are playing. And until next time, thanks so much for joining us here.
lost my mind, so please don't talk.